Hello my friends, my name is Titan and welcome to this 18th episode of my Cities Skylines project, Vedastein. The plan for today is to build the main market square of the town, and besides that doing, or more like completing the completing the left side of the lower old town based on the small river that flows through the old town, if you can follow me. I think you'll see what I mean in the course of this episode. And we start this episode by building a few buildings around the market square. But for these first few minutes, for these first few minutes, we concentrate on the area behind the city church and not on the market square itself. And so the old town of Vedastein has more or less three major churches. We have one church on the upper old town, which we will see in a few episodes, and we have those two churches here in the lower old town. One of those is the cathedral, which I think you already know quite well, and the other one is this church over here, the market church or city church of Vedastein. And it's this church that has the most important graveyard behind it, or is responsible for the most important graveyard. I think you get the point. And that's what we're doing in these first few minutes. And I'm already preparing this area by placing houses around it. And what you see me doing here with this kind of second row of houses is that I'm doing back houses. And some of you might know this this style of building from, for example, Berlin. I think in London that also was the case. But having back houses actually goes way farther back than just the industrialization. In fact, having back houses was quite common in most of city history. So you have the front house and the little backyard, and then there is a back house. And that usually was because back in the days when there was no electricity yet, it of course wasn't possible to have a big house and lamps in the middle, so you needed to have a kind of inner yard, a backyard, to have natural light in every room. And so that developed, and that's what I also wanted to achieve here. And of course, when we have front and back houses, of course it might be nice to have a backyard, a real backyard. And that also is what I'm doing here. For example, here I'm just decorating some of those backyards before we really concentrate on the graveyard itself, which we are starting now. And the story for this graveyard, or for this cemetery, is that based on the fact that the market church is the to say the more important church from the city view. So the cathedral is the important church for the church district in which Vedastein is in. But the market church here is the important city church, and that's so because during the history of Vedastein, all the important royal lords and ladies and dukes and duchesses, or later on the kings of Vedastein for these few years that it actually was a kingdom, all those important people were buried either in the market church or here in this graveyard. And that's why I also did it as a park, because it yeah, based on the fact that many historic persons are buried here, it's quite a somewhat touristic spot for, on the one side, those who are really interested in that kind of history, but on the other side, of course, it would be the usual tourist route. So if you are in Vedastein for one day, the tourist guides would lead you through this graveyard to show you, this is the grave of, I don't know, Duke Herbert of Vedastein or whatever. So that's why I put so much energy, so to say, in this cemetery, on this graveyard. But once we finished that, which will soon be the case, I'm concentrating on the, I don't know, second riverfront of the city, if you want to call it like that, because we have the wheel riverfront in front of the Veda River, the big one, which we did, I don't know, 10 episodes ago, I'm guessing. And then here we have the, so to say, second riverfront on this smaller river that flows through the old town. And now that I think about it, we still don't have a name for this small river, haven't we? At least I don't know a name. So if you have a name for this river that flows right through the old town, please feel free to suggest so in the comments. I'll look through those names, and maybe there is some name that we can use. Now, continuing with this, as I called it, second Riverside riverfront, more or less. And this is characterized by not really a promenade, but houses that are built right next to the river, more like in the river, but next to the river. And in this area we have a quite dense arrangement of houses, where we have the house, a small backyard, and then the river. And I'm guessing historically here would have been the mills of the town, for example, the mills of the town. In fact, I wanted to do a water wheel, a rotating water wheel to, in fact, have an old mill somewhere here, but I didn't have the time to actually do that. So maybe I'm gonna do maybe I'm gonna do that for another episode. I'm not quite sure about that, because it actually does look quite nice, with these houses so close to the river. But however that might be, let's concentrate more about the main market square. And the first thing we notice is that this is a quite big, actually it's a pretty big market square. And there's a relatively simple reason for that, and that is that historic cities or medieval cities in Eastern Europe, so basically everything east of the river Elbe, were built after a plan, more or less after a plan. And this plan usually, or at least, meant a big market square in the middle of the town. Because, for example, you can look at Dresden, you can look at Prague, you can look at Wrocław in Poland, or Breslau in the German name of the town, and you see that those cities really have a huge market square, and that is typical for Eastern European cities. And so, of course, Vedastein also needed such a market square. And of course, next to the market square, or the main market square, there are some bigger and more representative buildings, and that's what you already saw me placing, those big Renaissance buildings with gables that point toward the square. But for now, let's really build the market square. And I started this market square by plopping a fountain that I made specifically for this market square. in the real world, it's the market fountain of the small town of Aalen in Baden-Württemberg, which is southern eastern German about, and southwestern German, sorry. And yeah, I thought it fits quite well, and in fact it really does. And if you're asking, yes, I'm of course gonna publish this fountain, but it probably will be somewhere next year. And that's because in February I have the first examinations of my first university semester. So in January and in February I will have to learn and study quite a bit, so I'm saving this asset to release it then, because I won't have much time for asset creation in January and February. So that's something you can look forward to. So what I'm doing here is the size of the market square kinda made me, I don't know, I feared that I might not be able to really make the market square look inhabited and look interesting enough based on its size. And so I cut this piece on the other side out by placing some trees, bushes and parking space. So that's something I don't have to care about. It's just there and it's used for parking, maybe for residents, and I have a less space I have to really decorate on the market square. But when it's about the market square, I thought it might be good to not only have the square itself, with of course the usual market stalls on it, but I wanted something more special, so to say. And what I mean by that, you'll see just in a few seconds, and that is that I kinda simulate a festival or so that's going on the market square. So maybe it's some spring festival or it's city festival. I don't know if that's a concept that's known outside of Germany. So in Germany we have Stadtfeste or city festivals, which basically is that it's some anniversary of the town, and that's celebrated by having a festival with stages and where local musicians or local artists perform something, or I think mostly it's about eating overpriced food, but whatever. And so I also wanted to do that here, and that's why I placed this stage by Armesto. In fact, it's more or less the only stage I found with about the right size, and I put these walls of wood in front of the stage to kind of hide the fact that it's actually a stage based on some metal festival, and that wouldn't quite fit for this city festival here. So yeah, what I just did there with these white tents and the seats beneath it is basically the area for the artists where they can relax between their performances. And of course, in front of the stage we need some seating possibilities for people, so they can have a drink, have something to eat and watch the show basically. And I think that was a quite nice idea to have some more to have some more variation in the way I create or I decorate market squares, because to be honest, most of my market squares more or less look the same. We have a fountain in the middle and some stain decals, and here I just wanted to make something different, and I think this turned out pretty well. And of course, the rest of the market square is just market stalls. And I'm glad that we have, thanks to Skibis and $2.20s and of course Beard Monkey and Lost Gecko. So because of the Osara series and the Bazaar crops made for this series, I'm glad that we now have some fitting props for also European market squares. Because before that there wasn't quite, nearly was nothing that could be used to decorate market squares. But it's good that we now can do that in a better way. So here I'm just continuing plopping some market stalls. So the market square looks more inhabited. Inhabited? Does it sound right? Sounds good enough to me, so meh. I don't care. At least if you understand me, that's fine. And continuing this market square by plopping some event generators and PPGs. So we actually have some people on the market square in the end of this episode. And what I'm doing here is I'm placing some invisible paths. So people will go over the market square and through the small alleys between market stalls. And now that the market square is finished, we can concentrate on the more or less third big part of this series, which I already mentioned, is the riverfront on this small river here through the old town. And maybe you already noticed I had to cut quite a few things out of this episode today. And the reason for that is when I increased the speed of all the recorded footage I had, the episode was 40 minutes long, and I really didn't want an episode that long. I mean, this episode already is quite long with about 32 minutes, but I think it's okay. Please tell me if that's too long for you or not, so I can control a little bit more in the future. So what I did there was just extending the old city wall with this bridge segment. This design is based on the city of Nuremberg or Nuremberg in Upper Bavaria or Franconia. And I think that's something quite beautiful, quite nice to have this arched city wall, making place for a river. And so I used that here. And now I'm just placing some more buildings alongside the river. In some parts, as here, I'm using half-timbered buildings, but mostly, again, it's the Renaissance buildings that we have in most part of the city. But I like it to have some, to place some accents with half-timbered houses, and I think that turns out pretty good. And it's good that we have lost Gecko, who already made quite a lot of half-timbered houses, because I wouldn't have been able to do as much in this quality. So a big shout out to him, even though I don't think he watches my series, but hey, if you do, thanks. I managed to do 3 half-timbered houses in 3 weeks or so, and it's good to have yours. And what I'm doing here is detailing the riverfront itself, because just having the backsides of the houses is not that realistic on one side, but it's also not that interesting to watch and to look at on the other side. And so I'm placing, and depending on how much space there is, I'm placing some balconies with flowers or real backyards toward the river. We're gonna do more of that later in the episode. For now, well, what I'm doing here is probably the part of the episode I hate the most, because it was so incredibly painful to do this river so that it has a good and continuous water flow. And I think it took me 1 or 2 hours just to do this river river flow. I really hated doing that, and in fact I cut most of it out because just to spare you from that. But all that counts is the end result, and the end result is great because the river flows continuously. There are no huge waves, there are no chunks of water that flood the city. It turned out pretty good to have this river there, even though it meant quite a lot of trouble to me, but that's behind us now. And so how I did this was at first placing some keys to have the initial shape of the river. You already saw me doing that. And the second part was using the terraform tool to have a ramp from the lowest part to the highest part of the river, so that it's a continuous slope towards the highest point of the river, or the highest point of the old town. And then I used so here no, is it wrong? I'm not sure what I did anymore. I thought I at first used the terraforming tool, but seems I at first used some paths to actually have the ground on the right level. No, here we have it. See, that's what I meant. So I'm sorry for that confusion. So I made the slope a continuous slope that as the base of this river, and then to cover all those areas where the houses, I don't know, push the terrain inside the river, or I'm not sure how to call it. I used Ronix's Ronix terraform network to so I can determine how the shape of the riverbed is supposed to be, and that it's flat, and we really have a sharp cut, so to say, from the buildings next to the river to the river. And I think that worked out pretty well. And I'm seeing some very fast camera movement here. I'm sorry. I'll try to fix that in the next episode by simply have a more stable camera position. And here I just placed some detail in the riverbed by placing this savanna grass. And just by placing this grass, it feels more it feels older. It feels like this is not a new canal that's built here, but it actually is an old river that has its canalization some 400-500 years back, and so there are some plants growing in there, and so I think that adds quite a good portion of detail here to have these huge chunks of seaweed is probably the right name for it there. And again, I'm placing some half-timbered houses, and those half-timbered houses that you see here will be the base of the bridge leading from the main market square to the other side of the river. And we will do this bridge in the next episode, and I have some special thing in mind for that bridge. I already mentioned it in the 10th episode, I guess. I'm not sure. And you'll like it. I promise you. You'll like it. And again, we're back at the riverfront, and here I'm just decorating the backsides, the backyards of the houses alongside the river. And the point of that is to have it look more lively, more inhabited, whatever. And usually when you have such a historic riverfront, you very often have restaurants that have outside seating areas directly next to the river, or you have hotels with backyards to the river, which usually brings a pretty peaceful peaceful atmosphere, if you ask me. And you can see that in quite a lot of historical old towns. For example, you can see that in Prague, you can see that in Bamberg, or where else can you see it? In Ulm, you also can see that. So, yeah, I thought it's quite a nice idea. And as a bonus, in Vedastein, when you would sit here next to the river on your either on your terrace or on a restaurant's terrace, you'd have the river that flows by, and if you look up, you'd see the castle of Vedastein. And what better view could there be? Seriously. And so I thought it's quite good to simulate these restaurants or private terraces here. But also here I had to cut out quite a few things, so I didn't include the decoration of every terrace and of every backyard, because it would have needed too much time. And before we jump into the last few minutes of this episode, let me say a big thank you for watching this episode of Vedastein. And if you're new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. If you have any suggestions, if you have any remarks, if there is some critique you'd like to point out, feel free to do so in the comments. I read every comment. There are still not that many that I can't do it, so feel free to write something in the comments. And yeah, also follow me on Twitter, because over there during the week I post some work in progress pictures from Vedastein, but also from asset creation projects. So if you want to stay up to date, feel free to follow me over there. And for those of you that really want to support me, there always is a chance to do so on Patreon. And depending on how much you do to support me on Patreon, you either get early access to assets, which sometimes is weeks or months before release, depending on how much time I have actually, and you have early access to videos. And in fact, as of now, I try to have every video I do as early access, usually 1 week before its release. And so I think that's it for this episode. Of course, a huge thanks to the people who already support me on Patreon. Guys, you are the best, and you really help me a lot by supporting me over there. But all in all, that's it for this episode. Have fun with the cinematics at the end of this episode, and I think we'll see us again in the next episode of Vedastein. Until then, have a nice time, take care of yourselves, and bye bye.